from last week's material? Okay, so so as I said in the chat, I have created a separate channel for discussions related to the course matter. You can ask each other, you can ask the questions about any of the assignments or any of the material that's not clear. And as I said before, I would encourage you to help each other out if you know the answer. Otherwise, either one of the TAs or I will chip in if there is some serious confusion. The other thing I wanted to remind you is that tomorrow there is the quiz. So I will ask you to, you will get an invitation from one of the seven Greek lettered sections, and you should join there. And we have not decided the actual time for the quiz, but hopefully 15-20 minutes will be sufficient. So please come prepared with your questions for the quiz. And as someone asked today, the quiz will be based on the material from last week's as well as today's lecture. Okay, right. So let me share my screen. Okay, so one clarification I wanted to make, which was somewhat bothering me, is that this data from last week is actually from the third edition of ROS. It was really puzzling me because I had some other numbers and I realized that it's from the third edition and the year is different. So if you look at the fourth edition, which is what I'm following, the numbers will be different. Okay, so don't get confused. Okay, so last time we talked about various quantitative measures of data, measures of central tendency, as well as measures of deviance, and we also talked about the interquartile ranges. So today I want to hopefully finish chapter 2. I'm going a little slow, but that's okay, I guess. So today I want to talk about some theorems about data. So the first is an important inequality which works universally for any data set. So suppose, as usual, x1 up to xn is the data set. With sample mean x bar and sample variance s squared, as usual, right? This is our notation. Now a natural question you can ask, so before that, okay, so let's say the histogram looks something like that, or something like this. Okay, so okay, so let's say the histogram looks something like this, and let's say x bar is sitting somewhere here, and let's say x bar minus s is sitting here and x bar plus s is sitting here. Okay, so a natural question you could ask is what percentage of the data lies within x bar minus s to x bar plus s. Right. So, or in general, what or the opposite question, what percentage of the data lies outside this interval? So inside would be all this data. Right, so all of this. So, well, for any given data set, you can sit and compute this. I mean, that's not so interesting. But it turns out that you can say something absolutely universal for any data set, and that is in terms of an inequality. So here is the important theorem known as Chebyshev's inequality. So what does it say? So fix k greater than or equal to 1 real. No, I'm just to emphasize that this is not necessarily an integer. Let Sk be the set of i's such that xi lies within x bar minus ks to x bar plus ks. Okay, so here I was talking about k equal to 1, but in general you can talk about any k greater than or equal to 1. We'll see why greater than or equal to 1 very soon. Okay, and I should remark that this is equivalent to saying that mod xi minus x bar is less than or equal to ks. Right? So these two are equivalent statements. If you don't see it, ask me. And n of k be n minus the cardinality. So I'm assuming x1 up to xn is the data set. So there are n data points. Okay. So then the inequality states mod of sk by n is greater than or equal to 1 minus n minus 1 by nk squared, which is trivially greater than 1 minus 1 by k squared, and equivalently, therefore, n of k by n is less than or equal to 1 by k squared. Okay, so what it says, so it's rather amazing. It says that most of the data will lie within k standard deviations of the mean. This is something that should correspond to your intuition, but it's concrete. It says that only 1 by k squared of the data lies outside k deviations from the mean. 1 by k squared percentage of the data. Okay. Okay, is the statement clear? So in general, if I just tweak this figure and make this ks and plus ks, then it says that 1 minus 1 by k squared of the data has to lie here. There is no exceptions for any data set. Okay, that's what makes this so interesting and useful. And case 1 by k squared of the data, percentage of the data, fraction of the data, lies outside it. So it makes sense. If you increase k, this width will get larger and larger, and therefore the percentage lying outside it will get smaller and smaller. And how much smaller will it get as you increase k? It will go like 1 by k squared. So that's the content of this thing. Okay, so I'm going to prove this today, right now, but I'll make a remark. So why did I take k greater than or equal to 1? So note that this also holds or 0 less than, you cannot take k equal to 0 because there's you're dividing by k squared, but you can take 0 less than k less than equal to n, or maybe less than n, but it is useless. Why is that? So suppose k is less than 1, then 1 by k squared is greater than 1, and so 1 minus 1 by k squared is negative. But this is a fraction which is manifestly positive. So you are saying that something is which we know is already greater than or equal to 0. You are getting that it is greater than some negative value, which is trivial and therefore useless. And similarly, on the other hand, here for n of k you will get something larger than 1, but that's again useless, right? I mean, because you are dividing, this is a fraction. N of k by n has to lie between 0 and 1. But here you are saying that it's less than some number which is greater than 1, and therefore that's useless. Okay, I should also stress that this is easy. This is maybe even obvious. So this part of the inequality is obvious. Why is that? Why is that? Well, because n minus 1 is less than n. So this quantity is going to, minus of that is going to be greater than 1. Greater than minus 1. Okay. Please ask me if there are any questions. Okay. Okay. So let's prove this. So let us start with n minus 1 s squared. N minus 1 times the variance. So let me remind you what the variance was. So the variance was, by definition, 1 by n minus 1 times this sum. So n minus 1 times the variance is just this sum. So this is sum I equals 1 to n xi minus x bar to square, right? Okay. So now I'm going to split it into two terms. Let me start that on the next page. Or maybe let's write it over here. So now this is equal to, I'm not doing anything interesting here. I'm just splitting it into all the i's that belong to sk plus all the i's that do not belong to sk. Okay, so easy. So remember, sk consists of all the i's such that xi belongs to this. So these are the indices, right? By the way, I have a quick question for you. Why am I taking the set of i's instead of xi's? Could I have taken the set of xi's? Would that be the same?
Because, like, otherwise the set, in order to make the elements of the set unique, we would have lost information about multiple occurrences of data.
Sorry, Prithu, your volume is very low. I can barely hear you. Can you repeat?
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes, sir. Because if you take like the data points, then since the set can only have unique elements, information about points that occur multiple times.
That's correct. That's absolutely right. So it doesn't make sense to take xi's because there could be repeated elements. We want xi's could repeat, but we want to know the exact cardinality of the set. Okay, so if they are repetitive xi's, we would lose information, right? So that's why we are taking this. Absolutely good. Okay. So now Okay, so now let me come back here. I have n minus 1 s squared. I have split it in this way. Now I am going to use my inequality. So what am I saying? So all of these elements are positive. Right? These are all positive or non-negative real numbers. So I could discard some of them and get a lower bound. So now I'm going to throw out all these numbers. So now I just take I in sk, I not in sk, sorry. So I only take this term and I throw out this term. So the sum is at least as large as this term because these numbers are non-negative. Okay. So I have thrown out these terms to get a lower bound. Okay, but if I is not in sk, what can I say about xi minus x bar? So if I is not in sk, but if I is not in sk, then xi minus x bar or mod of that is greater than or equal to ks. Right? But that's by definition, because here this is less than or equal to ks. If you like greater than, strictly greater than ks, but you know, it's okay. I mean, it's not a big deal for our inequality. So therefore, n minus 1 s squared is greater than or equal to what I get by replacing each term over here by ks whole squared. I mean, the mod squared is the same as this squared, so this is greater than or equal to I naught in sk ks whole squared, right? But what is this? This ks whole squared is constant. It does not depend on I, so I can take it outside. And then I get n minus mod sk, which is n of k. Right? Okay, so I have got that okay, so now I divide both sides by k square s square. So divide, or I can do it in one shot. So the s squared goes away. So therefore, n of k is less than or equal to oh, so I've done something wrong here. Oh, sorry, n of k by n. So I divide both sides by n. This is less than or equal to n minus 1 by k squared. So the s squared goes away. What I put it in red, right? And n minus 1 by n k squared, which is less than or equal to 1 by k squared. Okay, which is what I wanted to prove. Okay, so this shows that most of the data, or everything but 1 by k squared fraction of the data, lies within k standard deviations of the mean. So let me take an example from the book again. We take this. So okay, so let me shrink it. Oops. Okay, so here are the top selling vehicles in the US for this month, top 10, and their costs, right? So the mean is given to us. It's whatever 31,000 whatever, and the variance is also given to us. So Ross has kindly calculated all of these things for us. So let's look at this data set, and let us look at two values of k. So let me take first k equal to 3 by 2. So in this case, what I am saying is that n of k, n of 3 by 2 by n, which is here n is 10, is less than or equal to 1 by 3 by 2 square, which is 4 by 9. Okay, and so if I take 1 minus that, so I get that 55.56% of the data lies within 3 by 2 standard deviations. 3 by 2 lies within, let's say, x bar minus 3 by 2s to x bar plus 3 by 2s. And let's see if Ross has done this computation for us. Here he has, thankfully. So here are the numbers. So this is equal to 20,607 to 43,151. Okay, so he says, so if you look, oh boy, did I take the wrong data set? Yeah, so that's correct. So so you see that almost every, so we say this, but actually in actuality everything but this data point lies within this region. So this, I mean, it spans everything. So we are guaranteed that 55.56% data has to lie within this region, no matter what these numbers were, so long as this is the mean and this is the variance, this is the standard deviation. But in reality, very large number, about 90%, or not about, exactly 90%, because 9/10 of the data lies within this interval. Okay. Similarly, I won't go through the numbers again, but if I take k equal to 3, then n of 3 by n is less than or equal to 1 by 3 squared, 1 by 3 squared, which is 1 by 9. So, which means that 88.9% of the data lies within x bar minus 3s to x bar plus 3s. Right? This is guaranteed.
So,
yes.
how 90%?
This is 1 by 9, right? So that's roughly.
No, in the 22,630, and the number above is not lying in this range, right?
Yeah. So 90%, 9/10 of the data, 9 out of 10 data points lie.
The 9th and 10th data point is not lying between this range. Right?
Is lying within this interval.
Oh, okay.
20,000 is the minimum. This is 22,000 whatever, and 43,000 is the maximum. So the only data point that's not lying is this 44,000.
Okay, yeah, understood.
Okay, so there's a bit of confusion. This will always arise. That's because one is on the one hand talking about data within this interval and data outside this interval. So the intuition is that most of the data should lie within this interval. So you should get a lower bound for the data within this interval and an upper bound for the data outside this interval. right? So we have a lower bound for the data within this interval and an upper bound for the data outside the interval. Okay, so keep that in mind. Most of the data should lie within the interval. Okay, all right. Any other questions? Okay. So let me start on the page. So there's a one-sided version that's also useful. Okay. So often one wants to know. So in most examples or applications, let's say, data are positive numbers, positive real numbers, right? So in that case, one is often interested in knowing how many data points are very large. Okay, so again, if I draw my cartoon histogram, I'll have something like this. Sorry, I'm very bad at this. One could have a long tail over here. So, so if let's say this is x bar and this is x bar plus s, one is interested in knowing how many things are outside here. I mean, in principle, there is no difference between too low and too high, but because most data are positive, you have a natural lower bound, which is 0. But there's no upper bound. Sometimes the numbers can be extremely high, and you want to know how many can that be. Okay, so similar again with the similar assumptions. So suppose data set is x1 up to xn with x bar with mean x bar and variance s squared. I'll not say sample mean. I mean it's obvious, but yeah. Okay, so now let n prime of k, just to distinguish between n of k and n prime of k, be the cardinality of all i's such that xi minus x bar is greater than ks for k greater than 0. Okay, so now I have not put the absolute value signs. Okay, so I'm saying xi is here. Okay, I could have defined s prime of k to be the complementary set, but okay, it's the same thing. Then by Chebyshev's inequality, we know that n prime of k is less than or equal to 1 by k squared, because the sum of this thing and the thing over here is already less than 1 by k squared. So this any one of these cannot be more than 1 by k squared. Okay. So this much you get for free, or not for free, but from the past result. But the one-sided version, so this is the theorem, one-sided Chebyshev's inequality. says something a little stronger, and it says that for k greater than 0, n prime of k by n is less than or equal to 1 by 1 plus k squared. So you get a 1 by k squared. You replace 1 by k squared by 1 by 1 plus k squared. And now this makes sense for any k positive. Okay? Even if I can take k equals half, 1/3, whatever, this gives some information. This did not give, as I mentioned, this is useless. The usual Chebyshev's inequality is useless for k is between 0 and 1, but here this does make sense. Okay? And the proof is a little more involved, uses calculus, but nothing too complicated. But I will not go through all the details here. Okay, so let yi be xi minus x bar for all I. Okay, so again I have n data points, y1 to yi. So here's an exercise for you, easy exercise, which I will not prove. So show that sum of yi's is equal to 0. So the conclusion is that sample mean of yi's is 0. Okay. If anybody doesn't know how to prove this, you can ask. Okay, so now now let me go through the proof. So this I will use in the proof. So for any b positive, so let b be some positive real number. I'll fix it later, but for now let b be any positive real number, and I'm going to derive an inequality. Okay, for any b positive, we have that again using similar ideas as the proof of the original Chebyshev's inequality. So sum I equals 1 to n yi plus b whole squared, yi is this, is greater than or equal to sum sum over all I such that yi is greater than ks of the same thing. Okay, so here, so maybe I should say this. So then xi minus x, so my condition xi minus x bar greater than ks is equivalent to yi being greater than ks. This is what this is. Okay, so what I have done over here, again because all of these terms are positive or non-negative, I can throw out some of them to get a lower bound. So I have thrown out all the terms below here. So in principle, I have thrown out a huge number of terms. Right. So this should be this should not give me too much information, but we'll see that it does. Okay. So right. So now let me expand the left-hand side, and so then what do I get? So I get sum I equals 1 to n again, yi squared plus 2byi plus b squared. This is greater than or equal to what? Okay. So now notice that yi is greater than ks. Okay. So here I will continue to sum over this I. Oops. Yi is greater than ks. But now because yi's are greater than ks, I can get a lower bound by replacing each yi by ks. And this is because this is positive. So here here I'm using the fact that yi's are greater than ks. Okay, so since each yi is greater than ks, I can just replace it over here. Okay, this I cannot do at the first step. I cannot replace yi by ks over here. Okay, all right. So now let me expand. So we come from there, and now we have what? So I have summation I equals 1 to n yi squared. Now second term is 2b sum I equals 1 to n yi, and b squared times there are n terms, right? So that's the left hand side. And now on the right hand side, what do I have? This is a constant now. It does not depend on I. So I have ks plus b. I can take it outside. And now I have to see how many terms do I have. But by definition, n prime of k is the cardinality of such terms. So I have n prime of k terms. Now let's look at the left hand side. I have some I equals 1 to n yi. That's 0 because of what I don't have. So this middle term drops away. This is just some constant. And now let's look at this. What is this? Can you see this in terms of something that we know already?
N times s square.
Almost, that's correct. So who said that? Yes, Kenel. Almost, that's almost correct. It's actually n minus 1 times s square because of this funny definition of s square. Right, but that's almost right. Okay, so now let me summarize. So now we have everything. So n prime of k now is less than or equal to what? N minus 1 s squared plus nb squared divided by ks plus b whole squared. Okay, so I have this inequality, right? And this is, I remind you, valid for any b which is positive, right? I can choose whatever b I want and I'll get this inequality. So now we can choose b to minimize the right hand side. Okay, so now you think of this as a function of b. You think of n, s, k all as parameters, and you want to minimize this. So how are you going to minimize this? Anybody?
Differentiate with respect to b and find where it's 0.
That's right. So that's the standard trick. You have to also differentiate one more time. I mean, you can use whatever, first derivative test, second derivative test, whatever you like. This is a nice rational function. Denominator cannot be 0. So so I leave it as an exercise for you to show. And since this is an interval which is not all of R, you have to also check that the minimum is not attained at 0. Show that the minimum arises when b equals s by k. Okay. So this I leave it for you as an exercise. So those of you who are not very comfortable or not yet comfortable with calculus, with 101, UM 101 level calculus, I encourage you to do it, because this kind of question I could ask you for the quizzes and the exams. Okay, so then assuming this exercise, we then get that n prime of k is less than or equal to n minus. Okay, so before that, okay, so first Let me divide by n. So first n prime k by n I claim is less than or equal to s squared plus b squared divided by ks plus b whole squared. Actually, it might make more sense to do. Okay, so let me rearrange. Okay, so first let's do this, just to make our life easy. Actually, then this would not even be true. Oops, sorry. Okay, now this makes sense. Otherwise, b should depend on n. Okay, so here to go from here to here, I've just used that n minus 1 is less than n. Okay, so then we get n prime k by n, k by n is less than or equal to s squared plus s by k whole squared divided by ks plus s by k whole squared. And if you simplify that, the s squareds will cancel and you will get 1 by 1 plus k. This will be 1 by 1 plus k squared, and this will be again 1 by 1 plus k squared whole squared. Okay, so that after simplification you get this, which is what we wanted. Okay. All right. So just to give you an example, setting k equals 2 in the original Chebyshev's inequality shows n of 2 is less than or equal to 1 by 2 squared, which is 25%. Right? So it says that at most 25% of the data can be 2 standard deviations above the mean, but n prime of 2 is less than or equal to 1 by 1 plus 2 squared, which is 1 by 5, which is 20%. So it says that only 20% can actually be above. Okay, so you get something in the list.
So I had a question over here.
Yeah, sure.
So in the example that you showed us, we saw that the actual percentages in real data is often, a lot higher than the,
often,
is a lot higher
strong
or
word
slash
because I've
lower
given
than.
only one example. Yeah. But yeah, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So is there what kind of a distribution would actually tend towards the equality in these inequalities?
Okay. So right now, so we'll answer such questions when we come to the probability part. That's a valid question. So when does it happen that Chebyshev's inequality is saturated? We'll come to such questions later. Yes, but that's certainly very valid. So, but you are right. In most examples, it's well within. I mean, it's not even close to being near the. It's. The data is well within the inequality. Yeah.
So I think the equality would hold when s of k values are exactly the mean, and n of k values are exactly the mean plus ks and the mean minus ks.
No, but that's true. But k is a parameter here, so this cannot be true for all k. No matter which, this cannot be equal for all k unless it's some stupid thing. So you can, for specific values of k, it would make sense. But I mean, certain distributions can satisfy this, but certainly it cannot be equal for all k. Otherwise, it's some very silly data set. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So, any questions about this? So I'm about these inequalities, or rather this important inequality. Okay. So the last thing from this chapter I want to discuss is paired data sets. And this is a very important part of statistics. So you want to learn interrelationships among data sets. Okay. So for example, I'll give you two examples and one example from the book. So for example, height and weight, heights and weights of students in this class. You guys. Okay, that's a data set. I mean, for each of you, I measure the height and the weight. And now the question is, are they related, do you think? I mean, if you are taller, then are you likely to be heavier? Is that true or not? That's one question one can ask. Similarly, temperature and humidity. If we were teaching in an actual class, if we had this class in an actual physical classroom, then I could ask about temperature and humidity in a classroom. What does it mean in a classroom? So I pick some point. I mean, there are many ways of doing this. You can pick one particular point in a classroom and measure its temperature and relative humidity there, or you could take it over several points and take the average. You could do many things. But even, yeah, so you could do, so these are data sets, right? I mean, so in general, we have collection xi, yi, let's say I between 1 and n. Right? So you have a collection of numbers, but now pairs of numbers, ordered pairs. So xi's are one measure and yi's are another measure. Okay. So so one way of visualizing. So how do you visualize? I mean, I can't draw a histogram anymore because I could draw a histogram for xi, but that will miss completely what happens with yi. Right? So one way to visualize such data is through a scatter plot. So again, let me go back to the book. Where is my scatter plot? Yeah, here it is. So, damn it. Okay, so here's the example from the book. Xi's are temperatures and yi's are the number of defects in some manufacturing product per day. Okay, so when the temperature, one day temperature was 21 degrees and there were 21 defects. One other day the temperature was 24 degrees. One day it was 27 defects. One day it was 28 defects, like that. Okay, so this is a scatter plot. Okay, so staring at this should give you some vague idea of what the relationship is, if any. I mean, if the data were all like this, then you can say something very, very strong. You can say that one is a linear function of the other. Or if it's like that, you can say some parabola, whatever, But in practice, this will not happen. There will be, even if they are closely related, there will be some spread. There will be errors in measurement. There will be all kinds of problems. There's limitations on your measuring equipment and so on. So things will not be as clean as a graph of a nice function. So that you can forget. So now we want to know some relationship between. We want to know if there is a relationship between these two data points. Okay. So one question, one natural, and maybe the first question one can ask: do higher and lower values of x correspond to higher or lower values of y? That's one question. Let's say Q1, Q2. It's the same thing for x, but other way around for y. Do higher values of x correspond to lower values of y, and vice versa? So this is one natural question. So if higher values of x correspond to higher values of y, then you should tend to see data like so, and otherwise, if for other question, you would tend to see data like so. So in one case it would be like this diagonal, and in the other case you would see along the other diagonal. Of course, not on a line. I just mean the regions. So how do I answer this question? So note that we already have xi's from this paired data. We also have the individual data. We have xi's and yi's, from which we can calculate all the things we have been talking about, right? So let's calculate x bar and y bar, the sample means. Okay. So if the answer to Q1 was true, if Q1 held, then xi minus x bar and yi minus y bar would tend to have the same sign. Correct? If both are high, that means this is positive and this is positive. If both are low, then this would be negative and this would be negative. And similarly, same sign tend to have the same, tend to have a positive sign. And if Q2 held, then both would tend to have a negative sign.
So I think same and different sign are correct.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. I confused myself. Thanks. Yeah. I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah. Right. So if one is negative, the other will tend to be positive, and the other. Okay. Thanks. Okay. So how do we measure this physically, quantitatively? So let me define that. So let Sx and Sy be the sample variances. Okay. So here's the important definition. The sample correlation coefficient is let's say Rxy, and I just call it R if it's clear from context. This is the sum I equals 1 to n xi minus x bar, yi minus y bar, that's a minus sign over there, divided by n minus 1, this same pesky n minus 1 is hanging around, this exists. Okay. So again, the occurrence of this n minus 1 is the same origin as the occurrence of n minus 1 for the variance. In particular, if you take xi equal to, if you take yi equal to xi, you will get the variance. But why this precise formulation? To see that, let me, I mean, the true reason will come when we start probability theory. But for now, let me motivate this from the following theorem. So R satisfies the following properties. Sorry, I said something stupid. If xi equal to yi, you will actually get 1 because the variance is also okay. So let me mention the following. So suppose a and b are real numbers with a not equal to, b not equal to 0. If yi is equal to a plus bxi, then R is the sign of b. That is, it's plus 1 if b is positive and minus 1 if b is negative. So suppose A, B, C, D are real, B and D are non-zero with sign of B equal to sign of D, and let ui equal to A plus bxi, vi is C plus vyi. Okay, so we have transformed our data set from xi, yi to ui, vi. Then the variance in the uv variables is the same as the variance in the xy variables. And the last property, which motivates this funny denominator, is that R is always less than or equal to 1 in absolute value with equality if and only if yi is a linear function of xi. Okay. I wanted to prove this today, but I will. So I will leave 1 and 2 as exercises. I will prove part 3 in the next class, or maybe I'll just say what the idea for the proof of 3 is, and I'll stop. I think I don't want to. So start with. I know I'm out of time. Well, I started 2 minutes late, so I think it's okay. So you start with the following obvious inequality. Take the sum over I equals 1 to n, xi minus x over sx plus minus yi minus y bar over sy whole square greater than or equal to 0. Okay, and then expand. So when you expand, you will get this squared, and that the sum of that will give you n minus 1. You will get this squared, that sum will give you n minus 1 also, and the cross term will give you r, and twice r of course, and then you will get so you will get n minus 1 plus n minus 1 plus minus 2 r greater than or equal to 0, and that will prove the inequality. That will prove mod r less than or equal to 1, sorry, 2r n minus 1. And remember there's an n minus 1. And that will prove that mod r is less than or equal to 1. And to see that I mean, for equality, each single term must be 0, otherwise this equality cannot hold, and that would mean that xi's are related to yi's via linear transformation. Okay, so that's the idea. So okay, I think I've gone way over time. I'll stop now.
Sir,
Are there any questions?
can we use Cauchy squares?
I can't hear you, Vedant.
Sir, can we use Cauchy squares inequality?
Yes, you can use Cauchy-Schwarz, yes. But I'm not assuming that right now. Yes, but you could use Cauchy-Schwarz and get it. That's correct. Any other questions? Okay, so let me stop recording, and remember there's the